Hello and welcome to Australia in Space TV. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with Australia in Space magazine and My Security Media. Today we're joined by Ian Christensen, who is the Senior Director for Private Sector Programs with Secure World Foundation. We have had Secure World Foundation members on before. So Ian, thanks very much for joining us and great to have you on.
Yeah, good day, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, this is a lead up to Space Sustainability Summit in Tokyo, 9th to the 10th of July. So we will cover off on that. But private sector programs, I understand you head up the Space Situational Awareness, or SSA, and Active Debris Removal, or ADR, program for the Space Sustainability or Secure World Foundation, but also obviously within space sustainability. Very interesting role, and it makes you travel around the world as well. But maybe introduce us to what you do day to day, and sort of the real focus that you have within SSA and ADR.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I'll try to get into that in a way that we can start the conversation and
Great.
go where it takes us here. So as you mentioned, we're hosting our Summit for Space Sustainability in Tokyo, July 11th and 12th,
Got it.
we'll bring in various aspects of the portfolio into that. But to start with, Secure World Foundation is a U.S.-based nonprofit organization that focuses on the issue of space sustainability. And for us, space sustainability is how do we work collectively and cooperatively to maintain the stability of the orbital environment for the purposes of maintaining the benefits that we collectively receive from space services and applications. So we do focus on the stability of the environment, but that is because space provides a lot of benefit across society, and we want to maintain our ability to access that benefit and to further develop our use of the space domain for beneficial purposes. My remit within Secure World is, as my title suggests, is Director of Private Sector Programs. That means I lead a lot of our engagement with the global private space sector on what responsible and sustainable use of space is in that context. And then on the flip side, work with regulatory and policy systems to change and evolve in light of all the fun, cool, exciting, and new stuff the commercial industry is doing these days. Throughout that, the importance of space situational awareness, so the information that we have and our ability to track, coordinate, and understand what's going on in the space environment. The sensor network that we use to do that, the international cooperation programs that we use to share that data, and then how operators use that to inform decisions about sustainability and decisions about collision avoidance and risk tolerances. So that is very much part and parcel of how we address the ways sustainability matters in the commercial space context, and it also has a regulatory and policy element to it as well. And then we also work on space debris issues. So both the remediation of existing space debris and solving that policy business challenge, and then working with operators, both governmental and commercial, to figure out best practices and approaches to mitigate the creation of future debris. So seems like a large portfolio, and it does keep us busy and active in a lot of different ways. But we view those issues as kind of foundational to maintaining stability and maintaining our ability to do beneficial activity through the use of space.
Well, one question I've got is, what are you seeing, or what are the trends that you're seeing within ADR and debris removal? Is it about returning sort of any new satellites going up? We know that they're going to come back safely. Well, that's the idea. But in terms of active debris removal, what are the sort of key trends or activities that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I always like to separate that into two parts, right? There's remediation and there's mitigation. And mitigation is what you're talking about what satellite operators
Yeah.
are doing to reduce future debris. And then remediation, I think, is somewhat of a more complex challenge in some ways, because you're talking about the historical legacy objects, primarily rocket bodies, primarily left by governments, and how do we identify and remove and address those things. And so we've seen a fair amount of activity from a number of governments, in particular in Japan, in the United Kingdom, and in Europe, in the European Space Agency, to work with industry to develop pilot technology and pilot programs to begin to demonstrate how to remove legacy objects. So ESA is partnered with ClearSpace and OHB to approach and remove it's now a rocket stage. It was originally going to be a satellite, and they've shifted the target, or shifted the client object to to a rocket stage. And of course, Astroscale has worked with the United Kingdom and with Japan to demonstrate both rendezvous operations and some initial demonstration of particular early stage debris removal technologies. So seeing governments invest in pilot programs, that's good. We're seeing the technology mature. That's good. It's a long way to go, but we're beginning to see how we can solve the technical problems of removing large objects. The questions are really, how do we sustain this from a policy standpoint? Right, pilot programs are great, but we need to be able to move those into operational and long, sustained programs. And then how does the business and economics work? Right.
Exactly the question I had in my mind is
Yeah.
where's the business in it? Like, who's, other than governments going, yeah, we need to do this. How do you make money out of it?
Yeah, and the way that we're seeing that develop is, where does debris remediation fit into a larger ecosystem of satellite servicing and on-orbit assembly and maintenance capabilities, or so what is variously referred to as ISAM or ISOM, depending on whose acronym you wanna pick. But right, so companies like Astroscale, companies like ClearSpace, companies like Space Logistics, they're looking at a broader ecosystem, right, of debris removal, but how does it relate to the ability to do satellite refueling, satellite maintenance, and repair? And so, to commercial technologies for rendezvous and proximity operations, commercial technologies for docking, those things fit into a broader ecosystem. So
Yeah,
your customers need to be broader than the governments.
yeah, as part of a sort of broader service. And I imagine this piece of debris is about to hit you. You're going to have to pay us to get rid of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So that's a just in time kind of model, and we haven't yet seen anybody willing to do that on a commercial basis. It's I think haven't really seen the value in that quite yet. Now, what we have seen is some of these large constellation operators, the OneWebs and others, install either docking, grappling mechanisms, fiducial markers to facilitate the removal of failed satellites if they need to purchase a service or to do that. And so we do see that piece of the ecosystem beginning to come into place.
How do you measure the range of international concern? Do you find that it's sort of settling now, and at the moment everyone sort of understands that they don't want to make it worse, but in terms of awareness of the sort of criticality of this, and particularly if an incident does occur, how it might impact everybody, is it that situation that this is a real problem and something could happen at any time, or look, it's not too bad right now, we just can't pollute it any further?
Yeah, so I think we definitely see awareness that this is a problem that has real potential of causing operational and business impacts with a reasonable concern that might occur. So there are companies in the commercial SSA world, such as Leo Labs, such as Excel Analytics, that have highlighted potential high risk conjunctions. Conjunctions is the fancy word for collision, right? Fortunately, those conjunctions have not actually resulted in a collision, but we've seen some very high risk, high probability incidents that have really raised that awareness. I think we've seen an increasing commitment by commercial operators to move past the 25-year deorbit commitments and say that the responsible thing to do these days is 5 years or better. Right? We don't need to keep our assets operational in orbit beyond their end of life for a long period of time. So let's try to deorbit these as soon as we can. That causes some interesting trade-offs with some environmental risks that we're seeing, but I think that's maybe a somewhat different conversation in terms of the impact increased reentries have on atmospheric chemistry and potential greenhouse effects. But take that aside, and then we're also seeing governments and others, but in particular governments, begin to develop what we're seeing called zero debris or net zero debris commitments. So ESA has said that moving forward, mission should have a zero impact on future debris creation. And India actually announced a very similar thing just last week, right? So governments are saying future missions, we need to make sure that we're not creating additional debris as a result of these missions, and that is a clear new trend in the last few years.
It must be a concern because given sort of projections of how many, particularly low Earth satellites, up to 50,000 low Earth satellites operating, and then having sort of that return cycle coming through, as you say, is someone doing the maths on sort of what is the the limit, or what is a reasonable sort of number, and how that looks then commercially?
Yeah. So there's a decent amount of research going on to what we call orbital carrying capacity, and that is what is that threshold in which operations no longer become safe or no longer become sustainable. Chris, there is no number. So that research is finding ranges. It's finding different ways of thinking about it, but it is not finding the end that is the magic number in any particular regime, and that's because that varies based on operations. It varies based on technology. It varies based on the mass of the satellite. It
Right,
varies
yeah.
based on whether you're concerned about long term, short term, medium term, right? So, uh, short answer, community is thinking about it, but it's not quite the clear target that you might conceptually think we might get to.
Well, it certainly sort of justifies your role, I suppose, particularly with the Secure World Foundation and the space sustainability work that you do. Someone's got to be sort of asking the questions and sort of in the middle of across everybody, particularly as a not-for-profit that Secure World does in terms of that work, and making sure everyone's sort of talking and keeping that communication line open. And that does bring us to the sixth summit of space sustainability. And you're right, I beg your pardon, I was thinking of Space Tide. You're alongside Space Tide in
Exactly.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
So, and so anyone going to Space Tide, make sure you get along to the Summit for Space Sustainability on the 11th and 12th, and that's at the National Museum of Emerging Science and Innovation. You also are quite active within sort of the space events. What have you got coming up, and maybe highlight also what your role might be at the SSS in terms of the
Yeah.
acronyms that we seem to have.
Yeah. So we try to avoid that acronym for
I
some
did, it
reasons.
just came out.
Maybe that bit we might want to edit out. Chris, yeah, the Summit for Space Sustainability, as you said, it is the sixth year. I have to always make sure I enunciate that clearly, because rolling that phrase together doesn't
Yeah,
do
you
very
don't want
well.
to list with that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it really was motivated by what you just said, right? We see awareness of space sustainability at a very global level right now. We see operators, we see governments, we see users talking about the importance of space sustainability, but we do still see this kind of siloed or separate conversations happening in different disciplines or different areas of the space community. And we said, there really is a need to kind of bring different parts of our space sustainability stakeholders together and have discussions of solutions that cross-cut technical, business, legal, policy, operational, and say awareness is excellent. We're very glad to have that. Now let's see where we can do to start moving towards solutions. And we also thought it was important to bring that to different regional stakeholder groups. So we've done the event for 6 years. 6 years. It was in Washington, D.C. in its first year. Then certain global events forced us to take it online for 2 years. And then we were in London in 2022, New York City last year, and very excited to bring it to the APAC region this year. We're really trying to look at across the dimensions of space sustainability, how do we make sure that we enable new actors, enable a broader ecosystem, and don't create barriers of entry as we figure out what commitments and operational practices for sustainability are. So that's the umbrella that we're hoping to explore, and then within that we have a number of sub themes that I can and talk to. And then you mentioned other events. We're very happy to be coordinated with Space Tide so that we can. I think it'll be a long week for our Japanese colleagues, but to be able to bring an international audience in and have a good discussion of the space economy at Space Tide, and then support that and tie that into how sustainability enables benefit with our policy focused conversation. And then we're hoping to take the outcomes and bring it to regional forums. So I know APRSAF, for example, will be held alongside IPSEC in Perth this fall. So we're hoping that some of the outcomes and conversations that are seated at the summit can inform conversations and continuing
Right.
discussions at events like APRSAF and otherwise.
Nice, and a good plug there for the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference and the 30th APR-SAF, which will be held in Perth in late November. And I just wanted to at least acknowledge the Cabinet Office Space Policy Secretariat
Yes.
with the Government of Japan, which is sort of alongside the Secure World Foundation for this one. And I think from what we see with, and even you mentioned APR-SAF and JAXA there, Japan's very active within this area, in this domain. So it's great to have you on, Ian. I suppose one last thing is, I was just reading this morning, just popped up on my feed, the Pentagon sort of sparked that Russia put up a space weapon of some sort. I haven't read the details, but I suppose the weaponization of space just adds another layer on these issues. Just what's your general observation on sort of the weaponization of space and well, maybe another term is militarization.
Yeah. So the concern is that Russia has fielded a counter space capability, right? That is a system that would be able to deny or degrade or otherwise interrupt the ability of a particular U.S. asset to provide the services that the U.S. Space Force and DoD relies on, right? And we have seen a trend of increasing government investment in counter space capabilities in Russia, but in other countries as well. One of our flagship products is a annual report on global counter space trends and capabilities, and we assess most leading governments, including the United States, including China, including Russia, and including others, France and countries in APAC as well. And so governments are interested in these capabilities. They are developing them. We see a need to really, it does put, in my viewpoint, puts additional importance on us in the space community continuing to communicate about the benefit of stable access to orbit, stable access to the environment is, and how we rely upon that across all of society. Many counter space capabilities are threats to all space users and are a risk to all users. And so we need to be able to really reemphasize the benefit and reinforce that where we can as a community.
Well, I think overall it highlights when there is risk, I suppose, in these systems, it highlights our dependence and the criticality of space systems on the way that we live and our civilizations function. So Ian Christensen, Senior Director, Private Sector Programs with Secure World Foundation, there in Denver. Thanks very much for joining us today on Australian Space TV.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and it was a good time.